I'm actually in a closet right now. So.
It's a pretty nice closet.
It is. That's the nice part. I won't show you the part that's being called.
Welcome everyone to Stage Right. I'm your host, Sierra Haynes. My goal is to bring you along on a journey inside the minds and lives of some of Canada's most exciting playwrights. I've interviewed 5 playwrights that I've been curious to speak with, and now those playwrights are back and have picked other writers that they want to get curious with. Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. Whatever you're doing, we've got a story for you. This is Stage Right. This conversation is such a treat. We have our dynamic duo back, Beth Graham and Daniela Vlaskalic, and they've asked Karen Hines to chat from inside her closet. I'm hosting from my bedroom. Beth and Daniela are really the only ones in actual office spaces. Karen began as a comedian on the fringes and has emerged as an award-winning author and 2-time finalist for the Governor General's Literary Award for Drama. Karen's plays and short films featuring Pochsy have been presented on 5 continents, and along with her other literary satires, have earned her a loyal following and a reputation as a fierce, original, and provocateur. She has performed extensively on stage and screen, in her own shows and short films, and in many others. Karen recently premiered All the Little Animals I've Eaten to sold-out houses at One Yellow Rabbit's high-performance rodeo, and toured Crawlspace from Toronto's Videofag to Vancouver's Boca del Lupo, and via private kitchens and microsalons back to an extended sold-out run at Soulpepper. We discuss her early days at Second City Toronto, swearing off being in her own shows, and if you stick around, you'll even get to know her favorite pen to write with. Together, we cover her newest show, Pochsy IV. We also talk about Crawlspace, All the Little Animals I Have Eaten, and Drama Pilot Episode. I feel like our discussion does a great job of contextualizing each show for you, so surprisingly enough, no synopsis this week. So here we all are. This is a round 2 conversation. So we're welcoming back Beth Graham and Daniela Vlaskalic, and they have picked to speak with Karen Hines. I'm so excited. Yeah. Welcome, everyone.
Hello. Welcome, Karen.
Hello. Is this where I say, hello, this is Karen Hines, and this is Stage Right? Did I just ruin the spontaneity of that?
No, you're actually so much more on it than I am.
Yeah.
I always ask this question first. Karen, how did you come to theater? What was your first experience in theater like?
My first experience watching theater was when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my parents took me to dinner theater, and I watched Dames at Sea. And I really, really wanted to be a performer right then and there. When I was 13, my step-grandfather in common law, that is my grandmother's 3rd husband, was an actor, and he founded one of the first indie theater companies in Toronto, and they needed a child in a play they were doing. It was an adaptation of Vlaskalic, and it was an amazing experience. It was a contemporary adaptation. There were actors in it. Some people will know these names, David Ferry, Barbara Gordon, Michael Hogan, Linda Thorson was in it. You might not know her, but she was one of the first, she was Tara King in The Avengers. And I was just blown over by the experience, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do forever.
That's amazing.
So you knew from a young age about performing. So when did writing come into it?
Oh gosh, not for a long time. I never would have imagined that I could be a writer at that age. My grandmother was a writer. She was a New Yorker published short story writer, brilliant writer. And she was a formidable person. She was about 4'10", and very, very intense and quite brilliant. And when I first met her, she was actually at her typewriter and typing away, and I just thought what she was doing was so magical and impossible. I never dreamed that I would do it. I didn't call myself a writer until after I had written things that were actually on stage and and people were saying them with me. That was at Second City, the comedy company. I was in their touring company, and in their touring company, you perform, but you don't write. And then at the time, they had a mid-stage company where you learned to write scenes, and then from there on in, if you didn't write a scene, you didn't get on stage. So, and you weren't writing scenes; you were writing them with your collaborators, unless you were writing a monologue. And I never would have. I don't think I ever would have come to writing, except for the fact that I was forced to.
So, when you started writing, Karen, were you writing things that you were also performing at Second City, or was it for other people?
Yes. The way it would work, you just get on stage with one or two of your collaborators with an idea, and maybe something that the audience had suggested. The way Second City worked at that time, and still does and has for like 50 years, is the first 2 acts of the evening are scripted material that was developed during the 3rd act of the previous run. So you would do your 2 acts of scripted material and then get suggestions from the audience for locations, topics of conversation, political problems. And so the audience is sort of scripting it with you in a sense, in that they're telling you what they want to see. And then you go backstage, and for about 15, 20 minutes, you brainstorm and you come up with ideas, a location, a relationship, a problem, and then you would go out and improvise. And typically, the first time out, there would be nothing written at all except for the basic elements, the who, what, and where of it. And then maybe the next night, if you enjoyed doing that scene, you would take that scene out again and try to finesse it a little bit, and decide that you're going to, flip roles, or that you're going to add a child into the scene or something like that. And then you improvise it again. And miraculously, I still think it's miraculous, miraculously over a course of weeks, kind of many weeks sometimes. It takes 6 months often to put a Second City show. After a course of weeks, these various scenes would be fine-tuned and developed, and down to every breath, it's and sometimes never even written down.
Oh, okay. So most of it was on its feet, improvised, and just by repetition, it would come to be, rather than actually sitting down and typing it out or writing it out.
Yes, although that did sometimes happen. Sometimes for trickier scenes, or scenes where there were full cast, and lots going on, or things that had to happen simultaneously, then you might need to sit down and write it out. But very often the scenes never got written out until after they were performed on opening night, and then the stage manager's job was to watch the video and write it out.
So is there still an element, do you still use improv, that initial, when you're writing your work now, or any of your work, is there that process, or is it, what's the process now when you're creating work?
I would say that if I'm writing a play for other people, something that I'm not in, no, I don't really use improv, except maybe if I'm reading it to somebody, reading it to a friend, or reading it to my husband, who patiently listens to a lot of things. I might come up with something as I'm reading, or a friend might throw something out, and I ask if I can pay them to include it. But if I'm writing for myself, I would say that there is some that comes out of improv. Certainly in my very first solo show, there was, because I hadn't finished writing it when I first got on stage to perform it. There was a whole like quarter of the show that was not scripted. I knew what was going to happen, and I knew the elements. I knew the who, what, and where. I knew the images that I wanted to include, but I just didn't have time to put it together. And so that was terrifying, and it was great because it really made for something that was quite quite alive, quite vivid in the end on the page, perhaps more so than if I just tried to script it. I find it harder and harder to find the situations to do that in now. For example, I'm doing a performance coming up in about 10 days, and I don't know a lot of the people, and it's described as a sneak peek, a work in progress, and it's just going to be 30 minutes or so. I will probably say some stuff, but I won't improvise huge passages. I will write those out and try to remember them. Sometimes things come up because I don't remember what I'm supposed to be saying, and something else comes out.
You get a nice surprise invention in front of a group of people. Expectantly watch staring at you.
That's right. And maybe sometimes not so nice. Sometimes just awkward.
What's this sneak peek that you're going to be performing in?
This is part of the high performance rodeo that was delayed this year. So in January 2023, we were supposed to all bunch of artists be performing their works. People were heading in from all over the country and across the pond, and then of course.
Wait, 2023?
Sorry.
Okay.
Now?
Just checking.
2022.
I've been living in a calendar that exists in 2021, 2022, and 2023. And I think, well, Beth, I told you I double booked something because I got the years mixed up. I'm having a really hard time. 2022. Thank you, Sierra.
Time is a weird thing right now. Time is a really wild thing at the moment.
It is. And I know that I'm not the only person who's had that problem. I'm checking with everybody now because I started to think I'm going mad. But people are having trouble with time. So the high performance rodeo was postponed because of COVID, and we were sort of hitting the peak, the first peak of Omicron, and so the high performance rodeo has been sort of carved up into chunks, and the first chunk that is being mounted is this coming the spring. And in fact, Daniela and Beth have a show in the upcoming spring edition of the High Performance Rodeo, which was supposed to be in February, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So now it's going to be in April.
And that's Dora Maar, right?
Yeah. No, Dora Maar, the Wicked one, yeah?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Tell us about your piece that you're working on. What's the title of that?
It is Pochsy IV. And there will be a subtitle. Right now, the subtitle is not in existence, but it might be Pochsy IV, The Portal, or Pochsy IV, My Heart Breaks for You, or Pochsy IV, So Basic, because I love Anna. I don't know if you know Anna, the TV series. There's a character who is, I adore her. She's kind of like a Russian Pochsy. And and she says, "Oh, you're so basic. You're so basic." So anyway, it will have a subtitle. So far, it is just Pochsy IV. This is the fourth in a series of shows featuring the character Pochsy. The IV stands for four, and also for the IV unit that she was once attached to. Pochsy is a character who works at Mercury Packers, where she packs mercury. There is an element of the madness that goes with mercury poisoning in her character, and she is Pochsy is spelled Pochsy. It's an anagram for psycho, and it is meant to rhyme with the pox. So this is a character that I performed first in 1992, and then again in 1993 and 4, and then toured off and on. The last time I premiered a Pochsy show, I think, was 2004. So it's been a very long time since I have done this character on stage.
So what's that like, revisiting a character when you've had an absence from her?
I was trying to describe the feeling to a friend earlier today, in fact, and I could really only come up with dread.
But is it like a homecoming? Does she feel familiar at all?
She does, but the thing is that it's been so long since I wrote a Pochsy show that I can't remember what it was like in the early stages. And right now I'm writing a bunch of stuff, and there aren't a whole lot of jokes, whereas Pochsy is known for jokes and lots of humor, lots of kind of short, quippy dialogue. And right now, it seems very heavily laden with the last 2 years that we've lived. Lots of COVID heaviness in the show. There definitely are jokes, and yes, I do feel like when I find her, I know her. When I'm trying to recreate the character and I'm not doing it right, I can tell. It's very clear to me, but it is. It's challenging and scary to go back. She's sort of more famous, and when I say famous, I say it. Denise Clark of One Yellow Rabbit talks about poor man's celebrity, which is like we're sort of famous with each other in the theater world, but Pochsy is sort of more well known now, I would say, than she was when I last performed the character. So it feels like there's some kind of that even people who haven't seen the character performed have an expectation of what it's going to be. It's going to be super funny, and I'm just not feeling very funny right now.
But here's this thing. Here's maybe it'll inject some Pochsy confidence into you. But because here's this thing that I observed from looking at your plays again and revisiting them, and that they come from these very dark subject matter or dark places, and they're hilarious. So do you start with, it sounds like maybe in this rendition you're starting with exploring the darkness, and then do you turn it on its head, or does it start from a sense of humor, or does it change every time? Do you always see the dark humor in something, or does it take a while to get there while you're writing?
Yes, to all those questions. And I would say though that what I have to remind myself of is that often the jokes come last, and I'm not the only comedic writer who says that. Lots of people share that feeling, that it's you can't get to the right funny until you've actually laid in the groundwork. So yes, and it does change around. There are certain things that I know right off the top are going to be funny. I know they will be, just because they're about a funny thing that everyone knows is funny. It's, humor of recognition, right? So there's some stuff like that. But then there are other things like, how to make killing panda bears funny. How to make death and non-existence funny. Well, they're not really funny, but finding the angle of entry is the trick, and I am finding that more and more with her. I'm finding the new way in, which is it is a darker place, because in the past Pochsy has always been dying because she's always had mercury poisoning from her job at Mercury Packers, and there has been confusion that is the result of that. Humor can come from so many places, referencing pop culture, which she's sort of a big part of, and lots of places that the humor can be found. But this is now really talking about the world at a time when we are truly imperiled right now. And when I did the first show, I was really conscious of things like climate change because my parents are scientists. And so I was able to access that dark place, but it wasn't so dark for people because even though they might get a dark joke, the feeling was that, oh yeah, but it's not that serious. So, we can laugh and continue on with the show. The trick with this show is going to be keeping them in the room, going to the dark places, which is not just Pochsy's, the end of Pochsy, but also talking about existential problems in a way that I think everyone can relate to more now than they certainly did 15 years ago. And so trying to find a way to do that and make it still somehow comforting, like the performance should be kind of comforting in that everyone gets together and has a kind of shared catharsis. I do believe that there's a lot of comfort in that, but I cannot go lightly around the things that are plaguing, so to speak, Pochsy.
So Daniela and Beth talked about how when they collaborate, someone's always keeping the enthusiasm or the fire going when the other person feels like maybe it's all over. So how do you do that for yourself? How do you keep your own engine running, ball rolling? How do you do that for yourself?
It's really easy when it's going well, because I just love doing it. When I'm searching, it's very difficult. And I won't even say that this time it's been more difficult. I remember the last time I wrote a play, a Pochsy play, I think it took about 5 years from the time I started to the time it was premiered. I often just like do things like get up and walk around, go outside, look online at boots. It's like there's no good solution. It's not, to quote a line from a One Yellow Rabbit, Blake Brooker song from Dream Machine, which is all about the Beats and their struggles writing. Writing's not a holiday. There's this great song that I'll try to remember a couple of lyrics. It's like, take a drink, have a sniff, walk the park in the dark. In vain you hold the bills at bay. Writing's not a holiday. A writing table is a dirty beast. It has 4 legs. An empty page on it is never clean. Get it out. Left inside, it's dangerous.
I love it.
It's so apt. It's not like I just do something and lift myself up. It's just sheer force of will at a certain point. I love the idea of having a partner. I'm envious of you two for that. I do have a director. Mike Kennard is my director, and Blake Brooker is my dramaturg. So I do have these two friends who I read things to every now and then, but they can get tired of you if you read it too often. And I would just read every day, but it's nothing gives me more pleasure than to hear the first laugh at something, to hear something that I read get a laugh. Mike Kennard is no good for that, though. Mike Kennard does not laugh when he's working. He stares at the page I've given him. I think he laughed. I read 30 minutes for him the other day. I think he laughed once.
That might mean it's golden.
Well, he does say that he's excited about it. We go 5 minutes into the conversation. He's asking me questions, and I go, finally, I said, Mike, is it any good? Are you going to quit? Like, what? And he said, no, this is really exciting, Karen. So,
nuanced.
Yeah. So it really is difficult. I doodle a lot. I write a lot of bad stuff. I'm trying to force myself to write shorter and shorter hours, because what I realize is that after I've hit about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours, I'm not writing well anymore. I'm trying to dredge something up. And that's for Pochsy. With other things, I've been able to write much, much longer. But with the Pochsy show, it's like I have to find the moment of inspiration, dive into it, stay into it as long as I can, and then once I'm out of it, I'm probably out of it. I might have ideas through the rest of the day that I write down. That is a common thing. Once I have done a couple of hours first thing in the morning, usually, I am in the zone somewhere in the back of my mind. Things are still working, and I often come up with a line of dialogue or a lyric or something. And so it does keep going, but the intense period, I can really only sustain about 2 or 3 hours these days.
So I have a question for the room that everyone can answer. Why is everybody so obsessed with death?
Maybe because we've all had a bunch of people die lately that we know.
Yeah, or maybe it's just one of those things that is a huge mystery. There's so many questions about it, and so you can always explore a question.
Yeah, I think it really activates even people who would say they aren't imaginative or don't have an imagination. Everyone has created some kind of narrative for themselves of what happens after. And it might change and evolve throughout their life, but, everybody has created some sort of story for themselves of what that's going to be. Even if it's just, well, I'm just going to become, food for worms or whatever it is, they still have thought about it.
And I would venture a guess that a lot of us are thinking about it a lot more right now, and certainly for this Pochsy show, death is a big part of it, but I really wanted to try to make it beautiful and, multi-layered, like what you're talking about, Daniela, the sense that we don't know what happens, that mystery can be so beautiful and can be comforting.
I just know that it's a theme that's come up in everyone's writing here, so I thought that I would ask about it to see, obviously everyone is fascinated by what happens after life. And I think it's interesting that everyone aims to pull it apart and make our own guesses all the time through art and express that.
Yeah, it's like, there's an infiniteness to it that is rich and provides lots of space for us.
Do you think there's something too about, I don't know, that something about being in the theater too, you're acknowledging being alive? And so, I don't know, death just factors into that?
Well, it's like, with the Drowning Girls, for example, they're all dead. And yet they're so lively, right? And yeah, the performers are alive and the audience is alive, and there's that beautiful magic space that exists. And I found the Drowning Girls very comforting. Not all of it.
Did you want to go home and have a nice warm bath afterwards?
I found the beauty of it very comforting.
I think, Karen, what I love so much about your plays, and you mentioned this earlier when you talked about climate change, is that you seem to be able to marry an existential struggle that's happening in the world with a personal struggle that's happening with a character. And you mesh them so beautifully that I don't feel like I'm sitting at a play, that a social action, that it's a dramatic piece of theater. And that's what I love so much. So I'm really curious, does the personal struggle for your characters, and this might be a question about plays that you've written, for other people that you don't perform, or maybe it's both. Where do you begin? Do you begin with an existential or universal crisis that you're really struggling and fighting with, or is it the personal?
I would say that, well, certainly for Pochsy, it's personal in the sense that I use myself. Pochsy is satire, but I am not making fun of other people. If anything, I'm using myself to make, to, as they say in the Buffon world, to take the piss out of myself. And I see Pochsy as a microcosm of humankind at the same time. So every time I run up against a wall with her, I have to ask myself, am I not using myself enough, and am I not using the world enough? And I go back and forth between them, and very often they're the same, right? Because we're all part of the same world. For the bigger plays, the plays with multiple characters, the ones that I'm not in, I would say that they do come from a personal place, things that I'm sort of obsessing on. And sometimes, though, I just really just write both the last two multi-character plays I wrote came about by just free-form writing scenes, things that I was thinking about. So, I think, to be very insy, Daniela, you actually performed one of the very first scenes, or I think the first scene that I wrote for a drama pilot episode, but it didn't actually play in the play until about maybe 20 minutes in. So that was a scene between your character, Penelope Douglas, and Columbia, Penelope's friend, and it was just a scene in a bar with two friends just talking about being female, and it was something that I was thinking about at the time, and of course the world was very different then. This was like 2008, I think I wrote that first scene, and it was, what I would have loved to have seen on stage. That is often an inspiration. What would I like to see someone do? And then I try to do it. But the whole play kind of opened up around that one scene, and I wrote another scene connected to it in a different way. So it's very intuitive, and with Pochsy it's much more systematic. I kind of have a system for her. I do not for the bigger plays.
So how would you describe that system? If you had to if you had to outline it for us.
I begin with what I call kind of a triangle of elements for Pochsy. So because she has worked at Mercury Packers and is Mercury poisoned, dementia is a big part of her. So that's affliction. Then I always use some element of parody, whether it's Pochsy just talking about things that we all talk about, things we've seen on Instagram, things we've seen online. So I had parody and point of attack. So I throw in like what am I getting at? What am I criticizing in myself, in society? And then there's a sort of central element that comes with all of those things, which is survival. So what we call in Buffon, getting away with it on stage. So, when you talk about Pochsy not seeming like a political or, societal kind of lesson, that's the getting away with it part. So how do you have a point of attack without the audience feeling like they're being attacked, without you exposing yourself too much, making it comedy, but then the ultimate success in the world of the Buffon is you do a performance, you make the audience laugh, you're charming, you use parody, you use all the elements, and then you hope that your audience goes away and actually continues to think about the things that they have seen, like little bombs going off. So might repeat a joke or repeat something that they relate to in terms of criticizing themselves in a fun way, but also in a real way. So it's gathering the elements and then kind of making sure that they're all there. If I have a passage that's not working, and actually you're reminding me, I was writing this morning and having a really hard time, and I will probably go back right after we talk and look at this passage, and probably one of those elements is missing. It's either I'm not getting away with it, or it's not charming enough, or the parody is not clean enough or clear enough, and everything has to be sort of in place for it to work, especially because it is so dark.
Can I ask, how did your Shelter trilogy emerge? Was that a conscious decision? So that's 3 plays. all the Crawlspace, all the little animals I've eaten, and oh my gosh, I got it right here.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Drama. Drama pilot.
Pilot episode. How did that emerge?
I would say that I became fairly obsessed with real estate and all that it means, all that it can give to us and take from us when I lost my house through a very bad real estate deal and some shady dealers in 2006. It was a devastating experience, and not only because I lost the house, but because of elements that I won't spoil for you if you are to read Crawlspace. But let's say the Crawlspace was key. There was something in the Crawlspace, and it was clear. I think within 3 months of moving into this house that there were problems, bad problems. And then the problems just got worse and worse and worse. And then the problems were, in fact, really began to threaten my mental health. And lost the money. I knew about 6 months in that I was forever going to be in debt over this house, and had to get my brother to step in. My brother's a lawyer, and it was all I wanted to do was get out, because it was such a horrific and dispiriting experience. Not just because I wanted a house, but because the people who sold it to me were so vile as to hide terrible defects that I don't think that they knew how bad it was going to get. But it was because they hid things that it got so bad. And so I began to see real estate as something that is like a real societal issue in terms of why we want it so badly, why we're so obsessed by it. The fact that you can't really own land, as our indigenous population will tell us, easily. No one owns the land, so why do we think we own it, and why are houses skyrocketing in price, and why can young people who want to raise a family and could really use to have a house and not like a one-bedroom apartment, why can't they have a house, and all the reasons. So in Drama Pilot episode, the play takes place in a live-work hotel condo place that is actually on sacred ground, and on, as they describe it, on what was once sacred ground. And then what was built on sacred ground was an abattoir, which is like a meat packing place or slaughterhouse. And then that abattoir was turned into this condo because it's got nice thick bones. And Crawlspace was, the true story set in my house, which I no longer have, probably needless to say. And then all the little animals I've eaten was, again, I was looking for something to hold it together. I had all these different scenes. I didn't quite know how to connect them up. And my editor at Coach House Books, who has been the lovely person who has published my plays, said, well, why don't you set it in an all-female place? And because I was talking about the places where Sylvia Plath stayed, for example, when she was an intern at Vogue magazine. I think it was Vogue. And, I was sort of obsessed with these thick old buildings that young women would live in with only other women, sort of dorms, high-end dorms. And it just made so much sense. So all of a sudden, the house, or the building, became a character. And I described the condo that these women live in as a sort of like an 11-story condo that has, it just got kind of mental. It has green spaces that are little farms, and so that these women not only could live in places with just other women, they can actually have fresh farmed animals and vegetables. So yes, this condo became a character, a very complicated character.
How did those historical characters come into the mix? And when?
Well, I think because Sylvia Plath stayed at the Barbizon Hotel when she was an intern at Vogue, and I wanted to draw connections between that time then, women looking for so-called safe spaces, and this time now, women looking for so-called safe spaces. Now, La Ferme, which is the name of this 11-story condo, is not a safe space. None of these spaces are safe spaces, and that's kind of the point. So I think she was just one of the first who did it, and I loved the history of it, and I loved the hopefulness of it.
What did it feel like when you looked over your work and you realized that a lot of your work didn't pass the Bechdel-Wallace test? And how did that influence this piece?
I didn't really worry about it. Shakespeare doesn't pass the Bechdel-Wallace test.
No.
I'm sure many of my favorite plays don't pass the Bechdel-Wallace test. And for those listening who don't know what that is, to pass the Bechdel-Wallace test, a play has to feature at least two women who speak to each other about something other than a man. And amazingly few plays and movies and television shows pass that test. I'd say more and more are passing now. There's been a real movement since I started writing that play, which was 2015. Things have changed quite drastically since 2015. But at the time, it was really hard. I mean, when you think about anything from like The Crucible, for example. Well, they're all talking about, who is it, Proctor Harkness, the father character. Women are obsessed with men and or they don't speak to each other very often in plays. Women don't. I think The Crucible probably did pass the Bechdel-Wallace test, but when very, very often. Up until kind of recently, and when I say recently, I mean early 2000s, there were so many plays in Canadian theatre that would have 4 men and a woman. And when you think about, there are bands like that, and it was just so common. But I didn't worry about it because even though my plays didn't pass, they were not about that. And just because you do talk about a man doesn't mean that you're not having a feministic kind of approach to the conversation. For example, Pochsy talks about her doctor a lot. Well, is it really about her doctor? And she's kind of in love with her doctor. Is it really about romantic love? No, actually, it's about mercury poisoning. And I'm using something that is kind of attractive or charming, this sort of romantic engagement that she has with her idea of him, to like the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. So something that's fun, something that's funny. And she thinks that her doctor is in love with her because he is testing her so often. Well, no, that's not in fact what's going on. So, again, using that romantic notion to get a really dark idea across.
Karen, how do you decide if you're going to be performing? Do you know ahead of time in one of your pieces? And do you write the character to you? Or obviously with Pochsy, but with, I don't know. I know with Hello, Hello, it was a bigger cast and you were also in it. Whereas with Crawlspace, it was a one-person show. Obviously your story, so you would of course be in it. But do you know with your other, like with All the Little Animals I've Eaten or with Drama Pilot Episode or any of the other bigger cast shows, do you know from the beginning that you're not going to be performing, or does it just happen?
Yes, I mean, the fact is that I've only written 7 full-length plays. 4 of them have been solo plays. 2 of them I was not in, the most recent 2 multi-character plays, and I knew from the beginning that I would not be in them because I was in Hello, Hello, and swore never to do that again.
Oh, now I need to know what happened. Like, why?
Yeah, it was so, the first couple of rounds were quite a lot of fun, and they were small. The productions were very small. And so I felt like I was inside it. The third time we did that play, it was at the Tarragon Theater, and it doesn't seem like it's a big theater, but 200 seats is a lot bigger than 100 seats. And I found it very difficult to have a sense of what was happening because it was a bigger machine as well. There were more design elements, and I couldn't see them because they were behind me. And I knew that certain things were not going right. But I couldn't turn around on stage while I was performing or, in previews, which is where the set comes to be. I couldn't turn around and watch what was happening. It was really hard. And that was my least favorite, production of that play because it probably should never have been that big. The whole point of that play was that, at the time, Mike Harris was the premier and he was cutting, funds to the arts significantly. And so I decided to write a play that existed kind of almost 50% in spoken stage directions that described the world so that we wouldn't need a set. And then all of a sudden the set started kind of getting more complicated and expanding. And I thought, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think this is right. And I think for some people it worked okay, but I think, my own husband came to watch a preview and he had to take out his contact lenses when he was watching because there were really complicated lighting, like little polka dots carved into the backdrop that became three-dimensional for him with his progressives. And it was just, it was kind of crazy. And the set got really big and so things that had been very intimate, and that was the whole point of that play. It was about romantic love and, the escapism of Hollywood romance. And, it was harder to create that intimacy, across a vast stage.
So do you feel like if you had been outside of it, that you would have been able to guide it more?
I think I would have had a lot more, my concerns would have probably been taken a lot more seriously than they were as I was standing in my Calvin Klein underwear on stage and, trying to explain why I thought things weren't working well. As we did like sort of little rehearsals in the afternoon, I think we were only allowed like 2 hours before a preview. And, and I would literally be standing in underwear because it was part of a scene and standing in underwear and, trying to have the conversation. And anyone who's been in a technical rehearsal knows that's when the pedal hits the metal and becomes very, very stressful and people are very short of time. And so if you're going to make a complaint or, express a concern, you better be very sure. And I think that I was, because I was both trying to be a performer and trying to be a writer, I was less sure and I was trying to trust the people around me. And I think that no one knew. And it was not a disaster, but I was right. I was right. So I would way rather be outside. Then again, I had the same feeling when we were in rehearsals for drama pilot episode. And Daniela, as you well know, the director of that play was my husband. And, and it was still very hard to, express concerns. Sometimes I had to resort to doing it at 4 a.m. And eventually though, because I was on the outside and I was watching, I was able to, use my words properly, to say what I was seeing and what I felt needed to change. I was ultimately heard. So yeah, I don't think I would ever do that again. Go back inside a full cast. When it's a solo show, I have a lot of control still. I can call the shots, and it's kind of understood that is going to be the case. That a solo artist who has created their own show knows what they need on stage, and so it's a very different negotiation.
When you're enjoying life, just going about your own business, not writing anything, what kinds of stories do you seek out or do you find yourself paying attention to?
Well, I just, believe it or not, what's that TV show? It's not The Wire. It's Breaking Bad. I just watched my first episodes of Breaking Bad last night.
It's pretty fun.
It's really fun. I love good TV. I'm amazed that I've seen as many plays by Daniela and Beth as I have, because I actually don't go to theater very much. I hate to say. I am more inspired, I think, by films and television. You know, my earliest influences were David Cronenberg, and I loved horror films. I still do. And, I'm generally more inspired by those. I don't know if it's because of the images, or because, you know, with plays, it's very, very hard to achieve a great beginning, middle, and end. It's something that is very elusive for a lot of playwrights. When you go see a movie, that you're going to because you've heard it's good. Usually it has been so story edited, and so, you know, you can just kind of get swept away. Theater is work to go to, and I know it's terrible that I say that, but on a theater podcast, but it's,
we're here for the honest takes, okay? Your honest hot takes. That's what we're sitting down for.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in the whole beginning, middle, and end, which is, I think, why I love Drowning Girls so much. It doesn't really have a beginning, middle, and end. I mean, it has the feel of that. It has the feel of a start, the feel of a climax, the feel of a denouement, but it's not held captive by structure. And those are the plays that I love to see, the ones that are really about moment to moment as opposed to structure.
And then you mentioned how you're inspired by film. I read online that you're adapting Crawlspace to a film. What's that like? How often do you reference the show that you've already written versus just thinking about your life?
It's had 2 drafts already, vastly different. There's one that is almost like a Hollywood blockbuster, and it really has nothing to do with me. It has to do with some of the elements. There's always a dead animal in the crawl space. But in the Hollywood film version, the dead animal is actually a dead human, which is not the case in the play. So I took the play and kind of just went crazy, went into the horror territory, and it was fun. But then I believed at the end of it that it didn't have the soul of the original, and that I had kind of written something that anybody could write, and not something that only I could write. So I went back and I started to work on almost like a docudrama version, where there is a character who is, you know, like me talking to it's almost like Witches of Eastwood? No, not Witches of East. No, which is the one where they're green and they're looking into the camera, and
I don't know.
Blair Witch Project.
I couldn't watch that. Too scary.
Okay,
too nauseous for me.
So there's it begins like that, and but then again, it still ended up kind of feeling like not true. And so I'm talking to my director soon about possibly having me be there talking, and, you know, having like reenactments, if there's a way to do that isn't cheesy. So we're talking about making it like a real kind of documentary with not necessarily going back to that house, because I wouldn't want to let the people who live there now know what happened there. Let them, although they might, because the play is now a podcast, and I think a lot of people in the neighborhood know what happened to that house, and they call it the Raccoon House, because of So anyway, that one is still, I've actually put that to bed for a while I work on this Pochsy play, and I probably will get back to it this summer. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so quickly wrapping up here, but I do have a couple of questions. So Daniela and Beth got the opportunity to shout out and bring you into the show. So I would love to know who inspires you, or who are people that have, inspired your writing, or that you see their work and admire.
To be very honest, and even though it's sort of nepotistic, One Yellow Rabbit Theatre has been a great inspiration to me since before I knew them. And I am now basically common law married to one of them, but I think I fell in love with him by reading his plays. So that's my truest answer. If I can't go with Daniela and Beth, and should go with somebody who I'm not living with, I would say I love the plays of Alison Lawrence, even though they are exactly what I say I don't go to see. Alison writes plays such as And All for Love and The Catering Queen, which are some of the best written plays I have come across in Canada. They're absolutely brilliant and very almost I think they're underdone because they're so good you almost don't. They're not provocative. They're not. They're just beautiful plays about people and relationships, and so exquisitely done. Like there isn't a false step in these plays.
Nice. And I know that I made both you, Beth and Daniela, do a compliment hour. So why did you want to talk to Karen today? Shower her.
Yeah, I was hoping you would ask that question. It's interesting because Karen said about it coming from her that it didn't feel like when you were writing Crawlspace to film, because whenever I read your work or see your work, it feels like it can only come from one mind, one wild mind. And it also feels like when I'm watching it, I'm laughing like this, like that, because it's subversive, and I think I have this thought, I can't believe she's saying this or seeing it from that perspective. It's got this great subversive, like naughty quality that I love. And the language is incredible.
I love so much how visual you are. It's so beautiful. The spaces you create, either if you're using the stage directions like you've done and also done in All the Little Animals I've Eaten, or if it's just describing the characters where they are there, or the women talking. It feels so real, and and yet it's covering so much about the world and what you're saying about the world in such a funny way. I mean, I guess I just love the dark humor really so much, and it feels genuine. Like I want to be in those conversations when I see the women talking, or the drinks that they're having, or the food. You've always got such great foods, and it's so tactile. I want to be sitting in that bar. I want to be having that martini. I want to be eating that amazing, crazy thing that's being served, even if it's the mussel escaping.
Yes, not the mussel, not the bleeding raw mussel.
But it's so, it feels so alive and so, I don't know, raw. I just think it's so imaginative and amazing.
Oh, thank you both. You're giving me courage to go back to my desk and write a little more Pochsy tonight.
And Crawlspace should be required reading for all real estate agents. And
absolutely.
Home buyers.
And home sellers.
Yes, and home sellers.
That was a wild ride to read last night. I don't know, I do this thing to myself where I sign up for those sites that show you all the listings and houses to try and like mood board my life, you know, and then I'll get a hopeful real estate agent calling me being like, let's talk. How much money you have? What do you want to do? And I'm like, this is just an exercise in manifestation because I'm a recent college grad. I've got no money. But it was such a good read because I could really see myself in what you were expressing to the audience that would sit in that room.
Well, I really did write it for young people. I wrote it for all the, and for, you know, the artist class, the people who will never be able to buy a house. I kind of wrote it to make you and us feel better about never being able to own a home.
Shucks. Okay, unless either of you have one more question, I've also been asking this question to all of my interviews. So before I jump into that, do you have anything else you'd like to get in there?
What's your favorite part about writing?
I love Pilot V5 tech liners, I think they're called, that are very inky, very fine point pens. I love writing with them on nice paper, and I do usually start everything I write on paper and with pen.
Oh, I like that answer. Okay.
I was going to say too that you might recognize this, both of you, all of you, the moment where you do start writing something and you have an idea, and like often it's like pulling teeth to get stuff out. But sometimes there's that gorgeous moment where you write something and then suddenly it's like the pen has just like flooded the page with ink, but it's actually your writing and it's actually right, and you keep it that way. Very occasionally those moments of inspiration where it just comes, who knows how, through you. Feels like that. That happens not very often.
It's a good feeling when it does.
It's my favorite part too, when it rarely, yeah.
So my question that I keep asking everyone, and it doesn't have to be related to theater, acting, writing, anything, but if you could share one of the best pieces of advice that you've ever received, what would it be? Ass
in chair. You don't get it done unless you actually, and not everybody sits down to write, but that. And then I would say the other end of that is make a deadline, whether it's reading to your friend or doing a fringe show. Make a deadline. Otherwise, you probably won't ever finish.
This is true. Nothing like a good deadline to get your butt in gear.
Get your ass in the chair. Sure. Better sit down. Quick, sit down. I got a deadline.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, everyone, Beth and Daniela, for coming back to speak with me and for inviting Karen into the conversation. So it is wonderful to be a somewhat kind of like a fly on the wall here and just get to listen to three great playwrights chat. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and them.
Yeah, it was fun.
So great.
All the best to your shows that are coming up.
Thank you.
This has been Stage Right, another conversation. We'll all say goodbye now. Bye from Sierra.
Bye from Karen.
Bye from Beth.
Goodbye from Daniela.
On today's program, I sat down with playwrights Beth Graham, Daniela Vlaskalic, and Karen Hines. We discussed Karen's plays Pochsy IV, Crawlspace, All the Little Animals I Have Eaten, and Drama Pilot Episode. If you're interested in reading her work, you can find her writing online for purchase through Coach House Books. Stage Right is brought to you by the Globe Theatre in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada Council for the Arts, my associate producers, Tanner Zare and Riley Hardwick, who wrote all of our amazing music for this podcast, Chris Haynes, our sound engineer, and me, your host, Sierra Haynes. If you want to keep up with our theater online, find us on Instagram at Globe Theatre Live. And if you want to see what I'm up to, you can find me online at The Sinking Canoe. Thanks for listening, and please, exit stage right. Until next time.